Welcome back to another episode of Digital Fluency, the only podcast where you are guaranteed to get smarter about the digital world or your money back. Digital Fluency is a special podcast series from the good folks at the Studio for Teaching and Learning Innovation. I'm your awesomely antagonistic and always charming host, Adam Barger, and I am the instructor for the William & Mary course entitled Digital Fluency, Footprints and Philosophies, which provides the content for this series. Every week, we review what happened in class and discuss ways to apply these ideas to our lives. I am joined, as always, by student producer extraordinaire Jacob Hall. You're back for more, Jacob. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I feel inquisitive. I feel curious about what we might be talking about
that's
today.
Good. Yeah. You got to have a curious mind in college.
Yeah.
So that's half the battle, I think. You're open to new ideas.
I have so many questions.
Yeah. Well, I don't have all the answers. I like to pretend I do, but I thought it'd be important to bring in some other voices, specifically an actual student from the course.
Oh, wow.
So you're a student here at William & Mary, Jacob, but you're not in my course.
No, I've never read your syllabus.
Right. It's fascinating reading. And so you've been kind of reacting to our conversation, but as we wind down the semester, I really wanted to bring in student perspective from someone who's in the class. So that's what we have today. Are you excited?
I'm so excited. I want to know what it's like to have Professor Barger as your professor.
It's delightful. It's just fantastic. Oh, wait a minute. I can't say that stuff. So we do have someone else in our studio today. Emmanuel, thanks for coming. Take a second, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do here at William & Mary, and we'll go from there.
Alrighty, well, as you said, my name's Emmanuel, and I'm one of your students this semester. I am a freshman. I'm planning to major in government, and you've been amazing so far. I've really enjoyed your class.
Excellent. So I'll pay you for that compliment later. Let's get to know you a bit. Your favorite color?
Red.
Red.
Yeah.
Your favorite place to eat on campus?
Ooh. It was Chick-fil-A until they closed.
Yeah, it's a bummer. What was your question?
I want to know your favorite breakfast food.
I love pancakes. I love
good
pancakes a
answer.
lot.
Yes. Okay. We can be friends.
All right. And your favorite class this semester?
Digital Fluency.
Oh man, I can't believe it. So surprised.
That was an easy one.
Yeah, it was.
So Digital Fluency is a Call 150 course, which means at William & Mary, that's one of your kind of core courses as you start your education here. And it has an emphasis on writing. So instead of, quizzes and tests, you do, a fair amount of writing. And you're writing about the digital world. So it's kind of like this weird kind of combination where you're doing a very traditional assessment, which is writing, about something that is very digital and ephemeral and changing all the time, which is digital. So how's that been for you?
Honestly, I've enjoyed it a lot. I prefer writing assignments to testing, just because I've been surrounded by testing environments my entire life. It's a bit different. I get to express myself a bit better, and I feel that I learned the material more. And in terms of writing about digital, it's not too different for at least someone that's been around it so long, because it's just writing about what I'm surrounded by, I guess. Yep.
Do you think of yourself as a fairly kind of digitally minded or aware or proficient person?
Yes. I've always, since I was a kid, been surrounded by it. I've enjoyed it. I've built my own computer. I've always played games. So I've definitely been within the circle.
Nice. And so, Jacob, we do intake interviews at the beginning of the semester where I meet with every student, which is easy to do because we only have 15, 16 people typically in these classes. And I always ask them, how did you find yourself in this class? Is it a specific interest of yours, or did it just match up with your schedule? And that's okay too, if it just was the only 150 to fit your schedule, that's fine.
That's sometimes how you find the coolest classes outside of your comfort zone and expand your sort of interests here.
Right,
at college.
which is one of our goals here at William & Mary. Right, you want it's a liberal arts approach. So even with Emmanuel's interest in government and international relations or whatever else is there, hopefully this is complementary. The idea is it's interdisciplinary.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the goal. And so. It's good that you have interest in digital, but certainly not required. And I think that's been the case for most students in the class is, because they're a 21st century student, they kind of have a natural inclination to at least understand the digital world. At least they think they do until we start getting into it. So, Emmanuel, as you think back over the last 10, 11 weeks, were there particular topics or ideas that stand out to you of like, hey, this was either influenced my thinking, or this is a new idea, or this is a terrible idea? Like, what jumps out at you?
Okay, so the first thing that we covered in the class was intellectual humility, and that was definitely something that stood out to me because just the idea of how do we put it in class necessarily, like to think
the possibility that you could be wrong.
Yeah, to agree with that, or to see it, because often as we put it in class, our society promotes more so being right than thinking of being wrong potentially. And I thought that was a very powerful idea.
Yeah, and I think we had our expert on the show, right? Yeah, we had Johan on the show.
Yes.
And so, Jacob, you remember that concept, but we linked that idea to the digital world, right?
Yes.
Because the digital world is oftentimes creating these media bubbles or these echo chambers where you're going after what interests you, and you start seeing and hearing things that mostly agree with your world, and so you're less challenged. And then when you do see someone who has a different perspective, you say, whoa, wait a second, how can they have that perspective? They're wrong. They have to be wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas intellectual humility says, well, there's a healthy amount of skepticism that everyone should have. And you don't want to be servile. You don't want to be like, a doormat that people walk over, but you also don't want to be arrogant. So there's this, I think Johan called it the golden mean of intellectual pursuits, and being appropriately humble. So that's interesting that sticks out from you, because that was like way back at the start, I think.
Yeah, that's a framework that I will be writing my paper around for you, the 10-page one.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Which I'm sure you already have done and edited and ready to go.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
No, I'm glad that you're doing a deeper dive on that. So was there anything over the last 10 or 11 weeks that kind of rubbed you the wrong way of just saying, I'm not sure if that's true, or I'm not sure how helpful that will be for me?
I'm not sure if it necessarily rubbed me the wrong way, but recently when we look at digital minimalism, I definitely see why it is important, but I also am of the perspective that having more can still be a good thing. Focusing and centering your attention to get better at specific traits and skills is important, but with the vast amount of ideas out there, I think that it could be potentially harmful if you only focus on smaller things at times.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So the flip side of minimalism, and I think we talked about this last week, Jacob, was, you happily miss out on things.
Right.
So it's not like you wish you were doing other aspects, but you happily put them away. And I think, Emmanuel, what you're saying is possibly that could come back to get you if you're not definitely. At least, proficient.
Sure. Yeah.
Interesting. So this week we did a look at curiosity, not necessarily digital curiosity. Like sometimes I feel like we just kind of put the word digital in front of something and it's a new idea. But it is important to make those distinctions of how aspects of the analog world, transfer over. And so we looked at curiosity as an important skill. So not just like the trait of curiosity or the description of curiosity, but really a skill that you have to develop. You have to work on it. And it's one of the foundational skills of a digitally fluent person. And we're going to look at several of these skills. We're going to look at communication. We're going to look at creativity. We're going to look at innovation. But curiosity is the first one. And so we looked at that this week. So, Jacob, you said you were curious. So I'm going to throw some of these ideas at you and see if they stick.
Hit me with them.
All right. So the first thing we looked at was a video. I think it was a TED Talk, right, Emmanuel?
Yes.
And the woman in the TED Talk was a researcher, and she started with this idea of a vacuum tube and how hundreds of years ago someone decided to put, a current through a vacuum tube, and that was the start of understanding electrons. And then she connected the dots all the way to, X-rays and, different therapies. And what are the other things she connected to? Do you remember, Emmanuel?
The TVs having the, I don't remember what they're called, but the rays behind them, the old TVs.
Yep, the cathode ray TV.
Yep.
And she kind of traced this idea all through like 200 years of history, really. And it started with someone who was just curious about like, I have this vacuum tube. What happens if I pass some electricity through it? And her whole point was curiosity-driven research is crucial to our advancement, as a society. So it's not just about trying to prove something or discover a new thing, a new technique or a new idea, but it's really about being curious and being willing to kind of just try things.
Yeah.
And that was one of her examples.
I love that idea, and I think that it gets to a lot of like what we talk about in academia generally, where like say you want to research something in your the field that you're passionate about, and that might mean taking some risks when it comes to figuring out what you want to research or what you want to delve into, and from a digital perspective, like what you want to try out or learn more things about. And those may or may not pan out for you, if that makes sense. Like it might not be what you end up using for your, some sort of end goal or product, or you might not actually discover, some amazing new fact about electrons. But the fact that you are pushing things forward in your field of interest and you're looking for new ways to innovate or just to learn about the world around you, I think that's really valuable.
And I think that kind of gives a nod to our working definition of curiosity, which we're, like most good academics, we stole from someone outright. And the person's name is Ian Leslie. And Ian Leslie says that curiosity is a combination of intelligence, persistence, and hunger. Intelligence, persistence, and hunger. And so maybe later on when we get to the takeaway section, I can kind of talk about how those come over to the digital side. But how did that strike you, Emmanuel? Does that make sense to you? Intelligence, persistence, and hunger?
Yes, and I've always been naturally curious, and I've always valued that about myself. And just seeing it in general, I'm glad we started with curiosity, because I truly believe it's one of the most important skills someone could have. It does really progress society forward.
I love that. And I want to know, like, if you have tangible ideas of how your curiosity pans out from a digital perspective.
Well, I guess the most clear-cut and obvious one was I was curious about computers, and then I taught myself by searching out on the web or friends or people who've done it before on how to build my own one. And then from there, I wouldn't say I'm big on software, but I did take a look at certain programs or certain apps, and then now I can pass that on to other people or show them. And although it's not life-bending or changing, it was very interesting to learn about it, and I feel like I've opened my mind to things that otherwise I wouldn't have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the tips in the article, which was not by Ian Leslie, I want to make sure I give good credit here, that it was from Jonathan Y. And maybe it's Way. Sorry, Jonathan, don't know which one. W-A-I. Anyway, he was talking about ways to be curious. Again, not necessarily in the digital world, just like as a person, as a human, and certainly as a learner, how to be curious. And I think what most closely resembles Emmanuel's idea here is polish your mind with the mind of others. And I love the word polish, because it's not that you go out and find things that are interesting to you, although that could be important. It's finding those things that butt up against your assumptions, and like sandpaper polishes, a rock or something like that. You have to have that abrasion. You have to have that friction, to really make your mind keen on something else. And so the digital world exposes you to the mind of others on a grand scale.
Oh, yes. And I think that like when you are comparing your own sense of truth and reality to those that are presented to you online or just from other people generally, that's how you not only learn more about the world, but also come to new ideas that maybe haven't been thought of before.
Yeah, exactly. And so that leads into another idea in the article. And I don't know if you recall this, Emmanuel, and it's okay if you don't, not a pop quiz, but do you recall the piece about going to a bookstore?
Yes.
Okay. So the basic idea in the article was go to an actual bookstore, get away from the Googles, you know, and the Bings of the world, and go to a bookstore and just browse around. What did you think of that?
I thought it was very interesting. It's very it sounds very traditional, but I think it's something that we should keep around, because going in and kind of like a blank slate or an open mind and just letting your interest pique you by just what you see is a very efficient way, I would say, to find new topics and read about them.
It's the serendipity effect, right? Like, there's nothing serendipitous about Google if you think about it.
Sure.
So in the article it says, in the era of Google searches, we have no problem finding the exact answer to our question. But we may be less likely to serendipitously encounter information that is not specific to our question. And I thought that's so, like, I never thought about it that way. Sometimes you think of the Google as the opposite of, like, you put in something, you get all these hits, and hey, it could be anything. Not really, right? Because we learned about, like, algorithms and how they use data and things like that. So you're not going to have by chance interactions.
I love that idea so much. And the word that comes to mind when you were describing that is curation. Like, a bookstore would have much different curation when it comes to what they have on their shelves or what might be featured at the front of the store or something like that. And the way that you interact with it will just be so different just because of its own structure and the way that it's curated.
Yeah, and so, like, I'm guilty of relying on Google. You know, I'll pull my phone out anytime and be like, oh, let me figure out the answer to this, you know. And one of the other ideas was, you know, to seek out facts and information, but not to rely on Google, to have an active curiosity outside of Google. And I think that is a surprisingly difficult skill, like, in terms of curiosity. And I even did this experiment in class. I might have already told the story, but basically I asked students, say, if you need to know something, what do you do? And every single one of them said, Google it.
Yeah.
Every single one. And I think that was the lesson on learning networks. I said, no, actually, the first thing you do is you find a device. You find a pathway to that network.
Yeah.
But, you know, the idea is there because it is efficient, right?
Right.
And so the idea that there's a difference between learning facts for yourself versus Googling them. So, Emmanuel, do you buy that as a student, as a freshman? Do you buy this kind of line of thinking?
Yes. I very much do. And I'm just like you, and probably most people at the school, and just pulling out my phone and looking things up if I am ever needing the information. Like, it's just second nature.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's that access to information versus the experience of seeking it out,
right?
Or of living in such a way that you're curious about things. But obviously, we have to filter that a little bit. Like, we can't be curious about everything all the time. You know, so there's got to be this balance between I'm relying on the digital world for efficiency, but I don't want it to kind of stomp on my kind of creative tendencies.
Absolutely.
Let's see if there's one more on here. And again, I'm pulling most of this from the article by Jonathan Way. Here's an interesting one. So the other aspect of curiosity that we talked a little bit about is don't just focus on puzzles, but on mysteries. The idea of not everything is something that has to be solved. There's a grayness, there's a mystery to the world that, you know, it's less neat, it's murky, and that's okay. That's something you got to push back against because the internet has the answer for everything.
Yes, I love that. And I think that's also reminding me of this idea that everyone's going to have a different perspective on a topic. And there might be an active discussion as to what is right or wrong or what the truth might be about something. And, you know, if you Google it and then you just read the intro to that Wikipedia article, you might get a sense for that. But you might also miss some of the really important intricacies there. And if you are truly curious about the topic, you're going to want to delve down further. Maybe you're going to have to find a book about the topic and see what someone's perspective might be in a more like detailed sense.
Right. Yeah. And that you have to be willing to do that, to accept the fact that the surface answer is not maybe what you thought.
I love how this topic is going right into the research things that we talked about with on the fake news episode. And we're talking about the skills that you develop as a part of a digital, like, minimalist lifestyle. it's just all coming together, and it makes sense. When you're curious about the world and you're trying to learn more about the digital world as well as just the physical one around you, knowing how to advance forward in your curiosity, like, really gets at the essence of all of these conversations.
Yeah, and I think that's why when I first started looking at this class, I thought about starting with skills. Like, let's look at all the different skills you might need to be a fluent person in a digital world. And I ended up flipping it and saying, no, we need to cover, and I borrowed/stole this model as well from a researcher out of New Zealand, but, start with foundational kind of knowledge, like just basic understanding of the web, how it's changed. And then you go to kind of like these concepts like Web 2.0 versus 3.0 and having agency and that kind of thing. Right. And then after you have those conceptual understandings, then you go to skill building, where you make it much more practical. So it remains to be seen if that's a good idea, Emmanuel, or not. But that's why we did it that way, is I wanted to kind of build towards foundational to a little bit more kind of mercurial, kind of fuzzy things, but they are skills you can work on.
I think it's flowed perfectly. I mean, everything feels like it's building on the next. So I can't imagine the class having gone the other way around.
Right.
Like, if we had started with the top on what we're doing now on skills, and then we end it with foundational things, it seems backwards to me. But maybe that's just because this is all I know. This is the class I've taken.
Well, no, that's the right answer. That's absolutely the right answer. There's no grayness in that one. That's it. I'm just kidding. It's hard to pick up on sarcasm with masks on, people. So one more question for you, Emmanuel, and then we'll move into our world-famous takeaways section. And that is, as you wrap up this class and you go on about your academic pursuits, and maybe you're interacting with family or friends, and you're thinking about or doing something in the digital world, what might be something that you could see sharing with someone else who's not going to take the class? A little nugget or two. We could say, actually, hey, don't do it that way. Do it this way. Or don't think about that this way, mom or grandpa or whoever you're talking to. Think about it this way. Is there a nugget that you think would translate well to the non-class attenders?
Yes, but I believe it's a nugget that some people will agree with and some won't. It's the idea of agency that we've discussed, because not a lot of people want to give up their phones or give up how much control they're giving to those companies. And seeing that documentary we saw and all the discussions in class, I've certainly changed my perspective, and I'm more aware of what I'm doing on my phone. But I don't think it's something that, like, if I were to tell my sister or whoever, right, that's closer to my age, I don't feel that many people would like that advice.
Right, because that skill or that muscle has atrophied. And we've been through this a couple times, agency versus atrophy. Where you give your attention has to be part of your control. You have to be in the driver's seat. So I think that's a great nugget to take with you. And me as well. I am much more aware of my phone reflex. Right, just take it out and, just for no reason at all. Like, I'm walking down the stairs. I got to take my phone out. Like, where did that come from? Well, I've lost my agency to control my attention in that way.
Yeah.
My sister was visiting. Huge Digital Fluency fan, by the way, Jacob. She's a huge fan.
Excellent.
So she was visiting, and we were all on the couch. My sister and my mom were on one couch. I was on the other couch, and my wife was on the couch with me, and we're all on our devices. And I was like, "Oh, we're all fubbing." And they're like, "What's fubbing?" I'm like, "No, let me tell you." So that those kind of things, just being aware, is half the battle. So I do have some takeaways for you all on curiosity. So, Emmanuel, do you want to set us up for the takeaway section?
Sure.
All you got to do is say time for the takeaways, and with however much enthusiasm you have is fine.
All right. Time for the takeaways.
See, that was good.
That was perfect.
The guy's a natural.
Roll the takeaways.
Yeah. So the takeaways around being curious or having curiosity fluency, a skill that you work on. We're going to translate these from Ian Leslie's definition. So again, they were intelligence, persistence, and the hunger for novelty. Those are the three things. So if we were to kind of push these through the digital fluency filter, what comes out the other side? Well, takeaway number one, in terms of intelligence as an aspect of curiosity, learn to leverage your networks. Now, we talked a lot about network learning. So tip number one, or takeaway number one, learn to leverage your networks. Your intelligence or your overall kind of understanding is based on how you network your information. And so be intentional about that and leverage your networks in a way that's going to serve you, not that you are serving them. All right. So you own your networks.
Adam, can I put you on the spot and have you provide an example of how you could leverage your network?
Absolutely. So I'll give an example from my own life. So if I need to work on a skill, actually an idea. So there's this concept called digital wellness. And there we go again, putting the digital in front of something. But the idea is how do you live a balanced life? Mindfulness, wellness, those things are important in a digital world. Well, that's kind of a newer area for me. And I knew that I wasn't proficient enough in that. And I put it in the syllabus. Like, we're going to be doing this in class. But I needed to leverage a network that I was not in. So I was able to, through some Googling and through some other recommendations on LinkedIn and things like that, found an organization called the Digital Wellness Initiative or Digital Wellness Institute. I can't remember which one. And found a class on digital wellness, took that class. And so instead of just mindlessly Googling, digital wellness, I found a network that was established, was reputable, and I inserted myself into that.
Love it.
All right. So related to curiosity, but specifically trying to harness that intelligence. All right. So the second takeaway is about persistence. And this is to be curious in the digital world, you have to keep efficiency and purpose in mind. All right. Keep efficiency and purpose in mind. So again, curiosity is not just about being open to anything. It's about having kind of a curated, you mentioned this, Jacob, a curated or a purposeful approach to how you spend your time. And be persistent in that. Don't let it go. Have a goal and kind of go after it.
Absolutely.
And the final one is maybe the most interesting. So Leslie says it's hunger for novelty. A curious person has to want to experience new and novel things. Well, in the digital world, what does that look like? This is about having intentional interest and activity outside your media bubble. All right? This is a balance to persistence. So yes, you want a goal and have a goal for the digital world, how you use it. You want to be persistent in focusing on that. Be an essentialist, be a minimalist, whatever term you want. At the same time, you have to maintain this hunger for new or novel things. And so going beyond your media bubble keeps you humble, right? That takes work. Have either of you as students, as 21st century digital students, ever tried to really get beyond your media bubble and be hungry for novelty?
Yes, I have. My discipline would be government in terms of what I'm interested in to do here. And besides the call classes, which encourage you to go above and beyond, I have attempted at least to look at other courses. I want to dive more into philosophy because I enjoy critical thinking, and I think it opens a lot of doors to vast, topics. And I've also taken a look at potentially psychology because I want to see just how people interact with each other in general, or sociology even. And I think that that's a good way of broadening my personal bubble because I don't want to stick within the government circle only, if that makes,
And those areas could be complementary. They could actually make you stronger in your focus area. So that's where I think the balance pays off, Yeah. And I know you're a pretty curious person, Jacob. So how do you get beyond your media bubble?
I have my curious moments. I think that I do a fairly good job of reading news that might not align perfectly with my own political stance or the things that I'm generally interested in. It's something I am definitely working on doing better and more intentionally, but that's probably the best way I could describe getting out of my media bubble and trying to sort of appreciate other perspectives and maybe try to even understand why people are coming at it with a different perspective. My background versus someone else's background might inform why we're talking about something in such vastly different ways.
I actually would agree a lot with you there. And as one piece of advice I've been given while pursuing government is to do the same thing. And I've taken it upon myself to also look at multiple sources, multiple perspectives, and do my best to empathize or understand where they're coming from to the best of my ability, because at least in my humble perspective, being able to understand people makes it way easier to communicate. And in an increasingly polarized environment, at least politically, I believe something we don't do enough is listen to each other.
Oh, I agree so much. And I think that this is hopefully one of the skills that William & Mary is really like instilling in us. I think it's something we do pretty well here, like as a community, even if, we all are like, kids in our, the 18 to 22 age bracket for the most part. And we maybe have like similar backgrounds to some degree. I think we do a good job of like branching out when it comes to what classes we're taking and what topics we're discussing, and also having intentional conversations about how we are talking to other people and learning about where they might be from or how we could work with them.
Yeah, because I think this is a surprisingly analog skill for a digital world, which is seeing people as humans.
Yes.
And I have a real hard time getting out of my media bubble because I have lots of very specific interests that I'm very passionate about. And when I hear things that are so far outside of that bubble, it frustrates me.
Yes.
And so, but I'm really trying to work on that, because if you see people as humans, say, wow, there's a big group of my fellow humans that have this perspective that's different. There's got to be something there.
Yes.
And maybe you don't agree with all the adjectives around it, but the essence of it is there's got to be something to it. And so if you go into that as like, hey, even in the digital world, these are real human beings that I'm interacting with, that can also help keep you humble.
Oh, and that just like, I could get on my soapbox about that. I think that being human and expressing your identity using digital tools online or however works best for you is like the biggest skill, in my opinion, when it comes to harnessing the digital world for yourself. And then recognizing when other people are expressing their humanness, that identity online, and recognizing that for the value that it is, that's everything.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And so maybe this connection to curiosity is something that others can now be more curious about. Go learn for themselves. I'm curious about one more thing, Emmanuel. Did you find the Easter egg in the video?
No, what are you?
Oh, well, I'm not going to tell you what it is.
All right, I'll be going back to it then.
Yeah, but there was an Easter egg.
Oh no!
And so far as I can tell, no one has found it yet.
Well, I hope I'm the first.
Maybe
I will be going back.
Emmanuel's going to be watching that video all night.
Yeah, I will.
9 minutes of educational bliss.
Oh yes.
I'm so glad you made time for us, Emmanuel. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
It's no easy task sometimes to put this in your schedule and have a conversation like this with your professor, but you did it, and it was so great to have you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again soon.
Oh, I would love to. I really enjoyed this. I really did.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. All right, Jacob, we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.